Welcome to the Pilgrim's Rest channel. Our purpose here is really to introduce these incredible spiritual books, the ones passed down through ages, to you, the saints on the journey, so that you can find rest, find supply, and, well, be renewed. Today we're doing a deep dive into a real classic, one that's deeply practical, The Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence.
That's right. And this deep dive, it's really for anyone seeking a deeper walk, whether you're just starting out or you've been on this path for many years. The material we're looking at today, it offers a way to, well, continuous communion with God. And surprisingly simple, we're focusing on the conversations and letters, which is where he really lays out what he called the best rule of holy life.
It sounds maybe a bit lofty, the practice of the presence of God, but the man behind it, Nicholas Herman. His story is quite grounded, isn't it? Maybe even surprising. Before we get into the how-to, let's unpack the man himself a bit.
Yeah, let's do that. Nicholas Herman from Lorraine, we know him as Brother Lawrence, of course. He was a lay brother with the Carmelites, so serving the community, but not ordained as a priest. And his background before that, well, quite different. He was a soldier and also a footman.
A footman? For whom?
For a treasurer, a man named M. Fubert. And Brother Lawrence himself, looking back, he didn't paint a picture of, spiritual greatness from the start.
No, he certainly didn't. He was quite candid, wasn't he?
Very. He called himself a great awkward fellow who broke everything, really quite self-deprecating. In fact, one reason he sought the religious life, he admitted, was because he expected to be constantly disciplined for his clumsiness and faults. He saw that as a way to sacrifice his life and will to God. But ironically, he found mostly satisfaction there.
But the real turning point, the thing that set the course for this whole practice, came much earlier, when he was just 18.
That's right. It wasn't some dramatic, instantaneous event, but more of an enduring vision, you could say. He was looking at a tree in winter, just bare branches, stripped of leaves. Okay. And as he thought about how that tree would soon be renewed, leaves, flowers, fruit coming back, it gave him this incredibly high view of the providence and power of God. The sources say this insight was so powerful, it completely set him loose from the world.
Wow. At 18, and that connection, that love for God sparked then, it never really faded, did it?
No. He apparently said 40 years later that he wasn't even sure if his love had increased because it was so full and strong right from that initial moment. And that foundational experience, that enduring flame, it leads us right into the core of his teaching, the radical simplicity of the practice itself.
Right. So what is the essence? How did he define this practice?
At its heart, it's about establishing a sense of God's presence, just being aware he's there, and doing that by continually, conversationally relating to him, just talking to him, being with him. And importantly, he urged moving away from what he called trivial devotions.
Trivial devotions. What did he mean by that? Like elaborate rituals, constantly changing spiritual exercise?
Exactly, things that might distract from the core. He was very clear about what he saw as the substance of religion. He said it's simply faith, hope, and charity. These are the ways we unite ourselves to God's will. Everything else, all the specific practices, the routines, they're just means to get to that end, that union.
So if you've already achieved or are achieving that union through faith, hope, and love, the external means become less critical.
Precisely. They're useful if they lead to that union by love, but they aren't the goal in themselves.
And this speaks directly to motivation, doesn't it? He insisted the practice had to be driven by pure love, not for personal gain, not even seeking spiritual gifts or consolations.
Absolutely pure motivation. He wasn't even primarily focused on his own salvation as the driver. It was all about love. He famously said he was pleased when he could simply take up a straw from the ground for the love of God.
Take up a straw, that's incredibly humbling. It puts everything in perspective.
It does. It means the smallest, most mundane action, if done purely out of love for God, has immense spiritual value. It also led him to be quite critical of focusing too much on external things, like bodily mortifications.
Right. He said those are useless unless they serve that ultimate goal, right? Union with God through love.
Exactly. Useless, but as they serve to arrive at the union with God by love, the love is the engine. Without it, the actions are empty, spiritually speaking.
This is so relevant for you listening. Balancing work, family, just the general busyness of life. Brother Lawrence himself lived this out. He spent 15 years working in the monastery kitchen.
Yes, a place of constant activity and noise. And it was a job he admitted he initially had a great aversion to. He didn't like it at all.
So how did he practice the presence of God there, amidst the pots and pans and presumably the stress?
He found that the very task he disliked became, well, easy, even agreeable. when he consciously did it for the love of God. And here's the key insight for everyday life. He taught that sanctification, becoming holy, it doesn't depend on changing our works, getting a more spiritual job, for instance. It depends on doing that for God's sake, which we commonly do for our own.
So it's the intention is why you're doing the dishes or driving the commute or filling out the spreadsheet.
Precisely. Are you doing it just for yourself, or are you doing it consciously for God, aware of his presence with you in it? He reached a point where he could say, the time of business does not with me differ from the time of prayer.
The kitchen became as much a place of prayer as the chapel.
For him, yes, because God was present in both places, and he was intentionally relating to God in both activities.
Now, this sounds wonderful, this state of continual joy and communion. But let's be real, it's not always easy to maintain that focus. Did Brother Lawrence acknowledge the difficulties?
Oh, absolutely. His own journey wasn't instantly smooth. He talked about a period of profound struggle. For 4 years, he suffered greatly in his mind. He was tormented by the conviction that he was damned.
4 years?
Mm-hmm.
That's an intense spiritual darkness. How did he cope with that, especially if no one could reassure him?
It was terrifying for him, but he found his way out through what can only be described as radical resignation, a complete act of faith. He basically decided, okay, even if I am damned for the time I have left, I'm going to keep doing everything I possibly can purely for the love of God.
So he let go of the outcome for himself.
He let go completely. He said, I shall have this good at least, that till death I shall have done all that is in me to love him. And paradoxically, the moment he made that unconditional surrender, abandoning self-interest entirely, the sources say the trouble vanished. He found perfect liberty and continual joy.
That's profound. Giving up the focus on personal benefit unlocked the very peace he sought. What about the more everyday struggles, the times we just mess up, get distracted, lose our temper? How did he handle those failures?
His approach was remarkably simple and, well, peaceful. No drama. When he realized he'd failed, he'd just confess it directly to God, humbly. And then he'd essentially say, look, I'll keep doing this if you leave me to myself. It's you who has to keep me from falling and fix what's wrong.
So acknowledging his own weakness and dependence on God.
Completely. And then, crucially, he would just peaceably return to his practice of love and presence. No extended guilt trips, no anxiety spirals, just a calm resumption.
That takes incredible trust. This idea of perfect resignation to God, as he called it, seems central.
It really is. He believed it was a sure way to heaven, and he applied it very practically.
Yeah.
There's a story about him being sent on a business trip to Burgundy to buy wine for the community.
Okay.
Now, he apparently had no turn for business matters. He wasn't good at it, and he was lame, which made travel difficult and unpleasant for him.
Sounds like a recipe for stress.
You'd think so. But his response, he just told God, basically, okay, this is your business I'm doing. He didn't worry about his own incompetence or the difficulties. He trusted God, the ultimate manager, would ensure his own business was very well performed. He just focused on doing his part out of love.
That's a powerful way to handle tasks we feel unsuited for or resistant to. What about internal obstacles, though? Like the classic problem of a wandering mind during prayer.
Yes, the roving mind. He addresses this in his letters, particularly the 8th letter. He totally gets it. He acknowledges the mind is extremely roving. It just naturally wanders off.
Which everyone experiences.
Everyone. But he says the will is the mistress of our faculties. The will has to be the one to gently bring the mind back, and the how is key. Bring it back mildly and with tranquility.
So no intense mental wrestling match with the distraction.
No, because that often creates more disturbance. He explicitly advises, do not much disquiet yourself over these thoughts. Getting upset about being distracted is just another layer of distraction. Just gently, peacefully turn the mind back to God.
And he had a tip for making this easier, didn't he? Something about managing the mind outside of set prayer times.
Yes, a very practical point. He suggested that if you make a habit of not letting your mind wander aimlessly during your other activities throughout the day, if you practice that gentle, continual recollection of God's presence during your work or chores, then your mind will naturally be calmer and less prone to wandering during those specific times set aside for prayer. It's about cultivating a habit of attention.
This consistent, gentle practice led him to a really deep level of intimacy with God, which shines through in his letters. How did he describe that relationship?
He often used phrases like an habitual, silent, and secret conversation of the soul with God. It was constant internal communion. He even admitted that sometimes the joy and rapture he felt inwardly were so strong, he actually had to find ways to moderate them just to carry on with his external duties.
That's incredible. And there's that analogy he uses in the second letter. It's quite stunning. It really turns our usual ideas of relating to God upside down.
It really does. It captures the sheer grace of it all. He pictures himself as utterly wretched, a criminal against the king, full of flaws. Yet this king, God, who is full of mercy and goodness, doesn't condemn him. Instead, the king embraces him.
Embraces the criminal.
Yes, pulls him close, serves him at his own table, treats him like a favorite, and even gives him the key of his treasures. That's the kind of intimate, loving union he experienced as possible through the simple, persistent practice of presence and love.
And we see this deep trust playing out in how he advised others, especially friends going through suffering like physical illness. What was his counsel there? It wasn't what most people would expect.
No, it was quite radical. In his 11th letter dealing with someone in pain, his advice wasn't primarily pray to get better. Instead, he urged them to pray for the strength and the patience to bear the suffering as long as he pleases.
To accept it as from God's hand.
Exactly. To see sickness or any trial as potentially a means God is using for their salvation, for their good. To view it as coming from the sovereign physician, both of soul and body, who knows what's best, even if it involves pain.
That requires immense faith. And he lived that himself, didn't he?
He truly did. His own conviction was so strong he could genuinely say, pains and suffering would be a paradise to me, while I should suffer with my God, because the suffering was secondary to the communion with God in the midst of it.
Wow. That statement really brings it all together.
It does. It synthesizes the whole practice. The core lesson, the simple but incredibly profound takeaway for you, the seeker, is that we really must aim to be fully devoted to God. To actively work on casting other things out of the central place in our hearts because, as Brother Lawrence put it, he would possess them alone.
And the beautiful thing is, the life of this man, Nicholas Herman, the former soldier, the self-described clumsy footman. His life proves this isn't just for monks or mystical elites. This continual internal conversation, this practice of presence, it's accessible to absolutely everyone. Right where you are, whatever you're doing, whatever your faults feel like. As we wrap up this deep dive, maybe we could leave our listeners with that final thought from Brother Lawrence from his 15th letter, written right near the end of his life.
Yes, it's a powerful summary and a call to action, really. He wrote, "Let all our employment be to know God. The more one knows him, the more one desires to know him. And as knowledge is commonly the measure of love, the deeper and more extensive our knowledge shall be, the greater will be our love." It's that beautiful upward cycle. Knowing God leads to loving God, which leads to desiring to know him more deeply. That's the engine of the practice.
A perfect place to pause and reflect. Pilgrims rest you in. Thank you for listening to the Pilgrim's Rest channel. Hope to see you next time.